Good morning and welcome back to the channel from the edge of Lake Titicaca, often called the highest lake in the world at 12,500 feet above sea level, bordering Peru and Bolivia. I arrived here on the Peruvian side at the town of Puno at about dawn this morning after an overnight bus ride from Cusco. And even though it's chilly and I'm a bit disheveled, I've had breakfast and I'm eager to explore this remarkable lake. That's all!
We're going to the Uros floating islands. We'll be arriving to the Uros Islands in 40 or 45 minutes. Uros is a community. In Uros community, there are more.
We're on our way to the first of two islands. The first island is a reed island, one of the Uros Islands that the Uros people constructed. And of course, the second island will be Taquile, which is a natural island. Well, we've arrived on the island, and as you can see already from the water, we have a welcoming committee. Bienvenidos. Hola. Gracias. Igualmente. Kemisaraki. That's hello, how are you? The particular island we're visiting is Isla Tintino, which means Puma Island. According to legend, the Uros people migrated to the Altiplano from the Amazon and built their reed islands in the lake after not being well received by the locals. They used to say they had black blood because they didn't feel the cold. In fact, they originally called themselves by a name that means sons of the sun. There are only a few thousand Uros left who live on these waters. Most of them live on the floating islands like this one, about 125 islands in all.
Suben a la superficie. This is why the Uros are living on the shore of the lake. In the rainy season, they move the island over there with electricity. The local transportation for fishing, for hunting, for the children, because children go to the school. Utilizan transporte local para pescar. So the Uros made a floating civilization in the lake. But 500 years ago, they made the first island with this material.
The longfish is the kingfish, and the shortfish is the trout.
En los Uros son católicos, respetan la religión incaica. Miren, taxi romántico. They are in the romantic side.
Nansu tija Cintia.
Cintia, ¿cuántos hijos?
She's
single.
¿Y su casa?
Sí.
¿Aquí vives tú sola? ¿Tú sola?
Esta es la casa de mi papá.
¿Es tu papá y tú?
Y mi mamá.
También, los tres.
Esta es mi...
¿Cuál, perdona?
Y pues acá...
¿Ese es tu padre?
Sí, pues esta es mi artesanía.
¿Esta es tu artesanía? Sí. Voy a mirar, pues.
Gracias. Well, as you may notice, the Uros certainly do not disdain technology. This may be a thatched roofed home, but that's a solar panel powering it. And that was a widespread change here since the 1990s. There had been fires on these islands. You can imagine if you cooked or used lanterns, it was very easy to catch these reeds of fire. And there were, in fact, used to be tragedies because of it. But for the last 2 decades or less, solar panels have become a thing on the Uros Islands. Historically, most of the islands were in the middle of the lake, but after a cataclysmic storm in 1986 that devastated many of these islands, most of them were relocated to here on the west side of the lake, offshore from Puno. The Uros descended from a people who spoke the Taquile language, but over many decades they've intermarried with Aymara-speaking indigenous people of the Altiplano and now speak Aymara in Spanish. Their own language was declared extinct a couple of decades ago.
So we're about to take a ride in a gondola, which for some strange reason the Uros here refer to as their Mercedes-Benz. It's really a boat, I think, that's designed to ferry tourists around and come to the island. And if you're here, why not?
The reason for the existence of floating islands here goes back centuries, and that was for self-defense. In the past, whenever people here would come under threat, they just moved their island. Even to this day, some of the islands still have watchtowers. The island that I'm visiting or just visited, and the ones immediately around it are farther out in the lake. They do not have watchtowers, but some that are closer to the mainland, to Puno, still have the watchtowers. In this unusual habitat, the key to existence is the totora reed. It's a subspecies of a giant bulrush sedge. The Uros used dry bundles of it to make their boats, their houses, and the quote-unquote ground they walk on. All of it harvested from the lake. As the plant's roots develop, they interweave to form a dense natural layer called taquile that's about 1 to 2 meters thick. The taquile is the main flotation unit, roped together in about a 4 by 10 meter chunk and anchored to the lake bottom by eucalyptus poles, or increasingly poles made of metal. On top of the taquile pallets, the Uros add layers of cut reeds, but it's not a one-and-done operation. The reeds rot every 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on weather conditions, so it's a constant job to keep the island afloat, literally, by replacing the top layers, especially during the rainy season.
Of course, there's a substantial touristic element to all of this, and some people might take a dim view of the tourism that occurs here on this island and others like it. But the simple matter is, this is a manner of survival for people who are struggling to hold on to their culture, enter their way of life. And if you took tourism away, it's very doubtful that these islands could be sustained. Leaving the Uros behind, the final stop on my excursion was the beautiful island of Taquile, 45 kilometers into Lake Titicaca from the shoreline at Puno.
back on solid ground again here on Taquile Island in Lake Titicaca. The island has an interesting story in that from colonial times to well into the 20th century, this was a penal island. But in 1970, the Peruvian government awarded this island to the Taquile people, and today about 3,000 of them live on this island that's about 3.5 miles long and a mile wide. This place really is stunning. It rises up off Lake Titicaca at 12,500 feet to more than 13,300 feet. And the first thing you notice when you approach the island by boat is the incredible number of man-made terraces. Some of them, many of them, dating to Inca times and much in use today, as the island produces heavy quantities of quinoa, and potatoes, and other crops. Considering the small number of people who live here, Taquile has an outsized reputation for its textile and handicraft work. And interestingly, it is the men who knit. Young boys are taught to knit at about the age of 8, and it is the exclusive domain of the men. The women, they weave, and they make the yarn, and they teach their daughters to do so starting at about the age of 5. And the result, of course, is a small group of people who develop from early on extraordinary talents in the wovenware here, something that's been officially recognized by UNESCO. You see the men wearing these hats that have the little, I don't know what you call them, baubles on them, and they're indicative of whether or not the person is married. The same is true of women. In the case of the red bauble, I will call it, that signifies a married person. And if it's another color mixed with white, you're single. One reason this beach is empty is because it's hard to get to, and another reason is that the water is 52 degrees Fahrenheit, and yet there's always one brave soul.
It's nice.
How was it?
Not too cold. I mean, you have to get used to it, I guess, but it's fine.
Now tell me, where else in the world can you go to the beach at 13,000 feet?
For lunch on the island, a special treat. Not just the view. And the sweetbread. And the soup. But finally, the main entree.
If you come to Lake Titicaca and someone offers you anything else but the fresh lake trout, take the trout.
And all too soon, it's time to head back to the boat.
Well, it was kind of cold early in the morning, and it stays cool here on the sunniest of days. It's just a delightful place to be, sailing across one of the world's great lakes.